This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the G-Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a G-Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
Hey beauties, you know, the amazing thing about this podcast is that you get it for free. And today it is sponsored by one of my favorite girl businesses based in Northern California, totally female owned, family run, Pavani. Pavani actually means purity. And I personally use their products because they're amazing. They're organic, they're vegan, they're handmade by these beautiful Ayurvedic herbalists and totally Shakti empowered. I love their stuff. I particularly am digging their coconut milk bath right now. I've been doing a lot of Ayurvedic milk bathing, which is actually a beautiful Shakti ritual that cleanses the body, pampers the skin, calms the senses, and coconut milk is an option. You can use their coconut milk bath. It's got Himalayan salt in it. It's got cardamom, turmeric, Epsom salts. I love me some Epsom salts, lavender, and rose. So I'm really proud to have Pavani as our sponsor. And guess what? They're offering you guys, our dear listeners, a big old discount code of 15% off your purchase at their website, pavaniayurveda.com. We will give you the link in the show notes. That discount code is GHEESPOT, GHEESPOT. All right, guys, on to the show.
Hello, sisters. It's Amarie here, your program director at Shakti School. This week's episode, we're releasing on our feed an episode from another podcast that Katie was on with Dr. Vignesh Devrash. He's a fourth-generation Ayurvedic healer and the chief physician of the Ayurvedic Healing Center Sitaram Beach Retreat in Kerala, India. We'll link to his retreat center and the podcast in our show notes. Happy solstice, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome to Ayurvedic Healing and Beyond podcast. And today we have a guest, Katie Silcox, who is a New York Times bestselling author of the book Healthy, Happy, Sexy, Ayurveda Wisdom for Modern Women. And she's holding a master's degree in Hinduism and the Ayurveda sciences. Katie is an internationally recognized teacher, mentor to women, and inspirer of hearts and minds. She's renowned for her depth of study, her ability to present the complexities of ancient wisdom in a practical, life-affirming manner, as well as her unique capacity to distill the teachings with a humor and grace. So, Katie, thank you so much for being part of Ayurvedic Healing and Beyond. It's really an honor. And finally, I have someone who is a New York Times bestselling author in my podcast.
Well, the honor is truly mine. This is the first time I've been interviewed by someone in India about Ayurveda, and I feel very humbled and honored to be a part of your tradition.
Thank you. The first time I came to know about you, I was giving a lecture in a bookstore called East West Bookstore in Mountain View in Silicon Valley. And while I was giving a talk on Ayurveda and Panchakarma, and the bookstore had kept a lot of Ayurvedic books outside of the area where I was giving the talk. And then suddenly I see your book and I read your name, and now finally we are meeting.
That's so beautiful. How wonderful.
So, Katie, I see that you are so fascinated with India, Hinduism, Ayurveda, yoga. So what got you into this?
Vignesh, if I were answering you a couple of years ago, it would have been a slightly different answer. But now that there's more depth to that question in myself, I can honestly say I feel that, like so many Westerners, I lost my own tradition. There's kind of a trend in our culture away from religion, and for good reason in many cases, and away from our traditions and towards this sort of humanism and individualism and technology, and again, for good reason in some cases, but we lost a lot of our own traditions. And yet within me and within many of the students that I witnessed, there was a hunger for belonging and for spiritual process and for healing. And really, I began the journey because I was in a lot of pain and suffering, which I think is a reason many people come to many things. And then I found yoga and meditation. And then, of course, after yoga and meditation couldn't heal everything, I'd started to explore, Ayurveda, and we can talk about that journey as well. But it's an ongoing evolution.
I can imagine. And what got you into creating Shakti School, and why the name Shakti? Because it's a very profound meaning of the word Shakti. And I was quite fascinated the name Shakti School.
Well, as I lived in India for 6 months and was fortunate enough to live and study with A.G. and Indra Mohan, who were Krishnamacharya's students. And they said that they waited until they were in their later years of life to begin to teach because they were practicing. And that just really struck me. And after studying with them, I began to explore Tantra and started in the Sri Vidya lineage. I began to study, and I was a disciple in that lineage for 10 years. And of course, you know this, but the core central teaching of Sri Vidya is that we have this relationship to something called the Divine Mother, that Shakti. And that was completely foreign to my Western mind that had grown up with a religion where God's the father, not the mother. And so that took me on it. Now, I started when I was 19, and I'm, let's say, over 40. And, I've been really, really learning about Shakti ever since. But we called the school Shakti School, not because of necessarily a more feminist bent, but because of the sense that for so many of us as women and men and everything in between, at least in our culture, that capacity to relate to the divine as a feminine force was so radical and so revolutionary. And so now in my life, and you and I, I'm sure, could talk about this for hours, but I'm really interested in that Shakti Shiva, right? The balance of working with these dual energies inside of our own body as a pathway towards awakening.
And this is one thing I want to ask. Usually, when I go abroad and when I travel, people think that India in general, or Hinduism, or in general with the Indian culture, women are someone who are suppressed or kept under the carpet. That's the kind of feeling that people usually have, especially in the Western world. And for you, someone who came and studied in India and learned about the culture, was that a real U-turn in your approach to understanding the concepts?
I think when we're talking about anything where we're dealing with the complexities of humans and the complexities of vast cultures, there's no way to have a clear perspective. And that's really what India taught me. There's not one clear, one-way street analysis or argument around anything that has depth, value, beauty, complexity, and meaning. And when I arrived in India offered me, as the Divine Mother herself, that is India, a beautiful lesson in this complexity, where India revealed to me the most incredibly beautiful human spirit, while at the same time, some of the most hardest things I've ever seen in my life. Now, that's not to say that the dark side and the challenges of humanity don't exist in the West and in the United States. In fact, I would even argue they are there more because they're hidden. In India, it's right in your face. And so, of course, in India, sexism exists and the degradation of women exists. And yet, at the same time, you have this vast culture where the feminine has been exonerated and worshipped. And so that paradox is really how I see it. I don't necessarily see any place as this bastion of perfection around spirituality, health, and healing. I more see India as a place of totality where everything is available and in your face in a way. But yes, I hear your point. And I do think that there's this misconception in the West that other traditions or cultures outside of the West or the United States are somehow less than in their evolutionary process. And I think that's absolutely wrong-headed in many ways. Yeah.
I can so relate that, especially, and usually when people travel to India and when they learn more about the culture, history, and also the not so mentioned history, because some history are manipulated. So when you understand all of that, my God, we never know India, the other side of India is like this. And some people say either you hate India or you completely surrender to India. There is no in-between gray zones.
I don't know. I'm I'm hearing a little noise. I'm going to go in another room, but I completely agree with that. I definitely am on the love and surrender side of India.
And on one hand, you will see the contrasts are so high. It's like they say it's like another planet, or it's like an ocean where anything and everything is accepted.
Which is a metaphor for the entire spiritual practice.
Exactly. So, Katie, what was your approach with once you started learning Ayurveda and with the holistic healing? So, I see that this is your dharma of helping people who are approaching you to give them mentorship and also teaching them about Ayurveda. So, what aspects of Ayurveda? I mean, it's a vast knowledge on its own. But what aspects of Ayurveda do you think is like, wow, this is something that we see the modern humanity is needing more than ever?
Well, I want to preface the answer I'll give by stating that I've spent a significant amount of time grappling with let me say it this way. I want to state that the traditional Ayurveda, which I have not had the fortune of being privy to because I'm not from India and I haven't been raised in a guru tradition where the family had their Ayurvedic doctor, and that lineage that many folks have in India hasn't been part of my tradition. And so on one, and then, we could talk about the evolution of Ayurveda as a system in India, the roots. I mean, there's such a complexity to that. And one of my goals and missions in this world is to deeply bow before that, honor and protect that as much as I can, do what I can to protect that traditional system from your people. And if I can contribute in that way, I feel very fortunate. And then there's the Tantrika side of me that has studied the Charaka Samhita and read, because this tradition is so wise, in this ancient text, it actually says that the Ayurveda should be adapted and evolved for the place and the people and the time in which it's being presented. It's almost if the rishis knew Ayurveda would be one of these intact traditional medical systems. Whereas if we look at my particular lineage, of course, I believe in many past lives and with great humility believe I've been Indian many times. But if we just look at my personal lineage, our traditional medical systems, particularly those of women, were systematically completely destroyed. Whereas India is one of the remaining places where traditional medicine was not destroyed, although colonialism attempted to. Ayurveda survived. And so here we see that dichotomy of preservation of tradition, honoring of tradition, and yet the need to evolve and adapt Ayurveda to the time and place and the people and the diseases that we are dealing with that our foremothers and fathers, Vignesh, probably never could have imagined. The technological corporatization, the digitization of humanity, maybe the rishis saw this, but most Ayurvedic practitioners never could have imagined the onslaught of chemicals, diseases, stress that the modern human is undergoing at this moment. And so what that aha for Ayurveda for me, that is that the healing system isn't so much related to, wow, check out Shatavari and all the things Shatavari can do, or Panchakarma. And although I'm a user of these things, but really the message of adapt, and evolve. And I very much feel that it's my dharma to be a translator for as much as I can, given my particular configuration, evolve that so that people can make it accessible. Because one of the complaints that we hear a lot is Ayurveda is so complicated and so complex and seems so foreign. And we want to respect the ancient protocols, but at the same time, I believe that it won't be effective. Let me give you one quick example. Something like autoimmune disease, leaky gut, is responsible for so many of these autoimmune conditions that Western medicine does not know how to grapple with. This didn't exist 1,000, 2,000 years ago. And so the dietary recommendations, the Panchakarma protocols, all of these things kind of go out the window when you're dealing with new developments. And so I think Ayurveda actually does hold the framework through which we can update this operating system with modern science, modern naturopathy. We have to be willing to compromise on some of these traditional protocols while at the same time preserving traditional protocol. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. I think the word adapt is so important today. But some people ask me, isn't Ayurveda written thousands of years ago, and how is it relevant today? And we, humanity, are evolving, and how is it going to be relevant today? So I say the gravity is the same when it was thousands of years ago. The human brain is the same. The human body is the same. It's just that the external technologies and environments has changed, but these are like timeless principles that we have documented. And it's just a documentation of how man or human being interacts with his surroundings. And that was just observed and documented, and see how this can be adapted in the newer terms. So I think that's what we need to understand. And in fact, when it comes to this autoimmune disease, the concept of autoimmune disease is a complete Western mainstream medicine concept, because they say that the immunity hurts itself, or immunity that is something supposed to protect us, it is hurting ourselves. But in Ayurveda, there is this chapter called as Vata Raktam, which is like the end of the treatment. I mean, in the textbook Ashtanga Hridayam, we start with Jwara, which is the fever, and we finish with Vata Raktam. This is the finishing. And if you take Vata Raktam, you can put leaky gut there, you can put high blood pressure there, you can put the concept of gouty arthritis, you can put even all the autoimmune diseases that the modern medicine, which are idiopathic in nature, which they do not know what is the cause. But if you look at the symptoms mentioned in Vata Raktam, it is all coming. And it all talks about the lifestyle. Lifestyle is the first, unhealthy lifestyle is the cause of that. And when we just take it and see how we can interpret this, and what we see is today, Ayurveda is all about get back to your roots, get back to your basics. And I think that's what we all are trying to teach here and preach here, and to repackage it to the 21st century human beings.
I mean, you really nailed it. Get back to your roots, get back to the earth element, because for something like leaky gut, what we're seeing is that I'm a 1980s baby. I was born in the 1980s. And in that year, they happened to spray our entire country with something called Roundup, which is a chemical that we can now see destroys the epithelial lining of the gut. Right? And so on that root level, the gut is the soil of our body, and Roundup, of course, destroys soil health. And so lifestyle, when people hear the word lifestyle, they might think, doing abhyanga, scraping your tongue, going to bed. As a long-term practitioner of Ayurvedic lifestyle doesn't just mean those daily routines. It's how am I treating life? How are we as a collective treating our soil, our water, our air? Because if we are in wrong relationship with those things on a global collective level, then no matter how much Ayurvedic morning routine, nighty-night routine, shatavari, turmeric, ashwagandha you take, you're not that powerful. We have to, and maybe I'm speaking to this global revolution that must happen to actually, and I want to say this for your listeners. I struggle with a lot of these things and have since I was a very young child. And I used to think, well, if I could just do my daily routine better, or if I could just do my diet better, then these things will clear up. And I think we need to hold the remembrance of the deep compassion around not everything is the individual's fault. Sometimes we're dealing with karma that is national, international, and lineage karma of what our ancestors have chosen to do to the planet is going to affect the teaching, say, 7 generations down the line. And so I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I think we can change it, but to think that it's only scraping your tongue and, getting some ginger before you eat your meal, it's unfortunately not always that simple.
I think now that's why we have this concepts of epigenetics and how many ancestral issues can also come up into that. And it's so interesting. It's all, when you read Charaka Samhita, you will see about kulas, how your lineage can also impact certain diseases with you. Your environment can impact, your thoughts can impact, the people that you're surrounded with impact. If you are going to stay late at night, how that is going to impact your next generation. Yeah. It's just mind-blowing to what extent they mentioned. But at that time when you read it, okay. But right now, what I feel, the more I read science, the more I started understanding Ayurveda better. For me, that is how it is, because I was able to connect the dots backwards. But at the same time, today it is being more relevant than any other time. So, Katie, you also, teach about happiness and the radiance. So, tell me more about that aspect.
Oh, well, we must be psychically connecting, because I was thinking as I was listening to you, and this thought occurred to me of epigenetics, lineage, karma, and happiness. And often in my journey, I have wondered and I've asked God, why me? Why my lineage has done these crazy things? Why we don't have to get into the personal of that, but you can imagine we all have these stories. And I think I would ask that question as a yogini. My heart's deepest longing is to know God, right? And to awaken that love and radiance. Why so much pain and suffering? And it occurred to me, not because I'm special, it's just, that's the exact inquiry of the Buddha. This is the inquiry of all the great yogis and saints. And the pain and suffering is a part of the way in which the organism, on whatever level of the koshas we want to speak, from physical to astral, right? Often the disease is the way the body figures out how to heal. And on a happiness level, I don't want to call in any more karma or pain than necessary, but it's the very disease and struggle that actually has allowed me to enter into a relationship with your culture, with your country, with your ancestors. And that I think that there's this idea that we're doing something wrong if there's imbalance. And Ayurveda, can be a little strict around this. And I think loosening that up and really seeing as the wound often is the way in which we activate the seeds of a deeper dharma than just being healthy, right? Like you can be healthy and be an asshole, right? You can be a saint and have cancer. We've seen it with our great saints and sages. And so, for me, happiness, I would like to be free from all disease, but at this point in the journey, especially when we're dealing with things like COVID in your country, especially, I want to send so much prayer to right now, that to remember that we're on a bigger karmic journey that is teaching us the lesson of how to love. Unfortunately, the Divine Mother sometimes has to give her babies a little fierce lesson. And I think that the goddess Corona is kicking our asses right now.
I can so relate with that. I mean, looking at how we took so many things for granted. Yeah. And now when these restrictions are imposed and how people's anxieties go over the roof and we feel the world is collapsing. And I mean, 1 or 1.5 years in our lifetime is like split seconds in the universal cosmic time. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's a different one. But definitely, I mean, we do understand there is a lot of people suffering. Many companies are shut down, and people lost their jobs. It's a lot of issues that are going on. There's no doubt with that, but issues were going even pre-COVID. It's just that now it's bringing out the worst sides of us also. And in fact, when you talk about the wound, there is this quote by Rumi which I love. It is in the wound that you allow the light to enter inside of you. And that's where also the concept of prayaschita is a word which is a synonym for healing in Sanskrit. Now, the word prayaschita literally means when you do something wrong, your body will try to auto-correct it with a disease. And disease is the cure. That's what it says. So every time you have a disease, fall on your knees and thank God that you're getting this disease because your body is working. And this is your self auto-correction mode from your body to make sure you go in the right direction. Like if you eat a lot of sugar, then diabetes is the way the body is trying to correct you.
I think that's a really hard pill for many to swallow. I mean,
exactly.
In America, and India, unfortunately, is jumping on board, as you know. We don't want that. We want to take a pill and that the pill course correct so we don't have to actually analyze our choices, right? What I love about Ayurveda is it's ruthless and loving. Like I think one of my teachers is Dr. Ladd, and he's like, look, I mean, if you do X, then you can expect Y, and sorry. Right. And I think Americans, I can only speak about America, but want to take a pill and get going, because actually when you trace, Ayurveda says all disease has the origin in the digestive system and the mind. But if you really go back, what is the root of my condition? Unfortunately, it's going to actually take you beyond the physical realm and into the psycho-emotional and karmic and lineage realm. And that makes us feel feelings, and we don't want to feel feelings. We want to watch Netflix, So I think, I love this idea of the root mother medicine is the most brutal, but the goddess Kali is the one who loves you the most. So there's a lot of paradox here.
In fact, when you say the word ruthless, so once, there was a patient who came and said, oh, doctor, I have to do this treatment. Doing this treatment is going to be so hard for me. So when I asked, but living with this disease is even harder. So which one do you want? Either you choose the hardness of the treatment, which is going to liberate you from that, or suffer with this for the rest of the life. So both are going to be hard, but which hardness is better for the long term? That's what we have to see. And
there's a moment when the pain actually
exactly.
the pain of not changing gets worse than the pain of having the thing.
Exactly. I think that's where also, when you read about the concept of changing habits has a lot to do with the incentive. I think the incentive means, what am I going to benefit? They don't have a clarity what it means to be healthy in the first place. They feel this is the new normal. That's a problem.
Exactly. I think you nailed it. If people don't know what it feels like to be joyful or healthy, then there's no frame of reference to move towards.
Exactly. And in this aspect of Ayurveda, when you teach in your group and communities, which aspect do you think we need the most, but at the same time we feel we are resistant to it? Because that goes on to on.
It's very simple. That's an easy one, I think. I've worked with thousands of people, mostly women, but also men, all over the world. And what I've seen is that it's going to sound cheesy, but most of us don't believe that we're worthy of receiving love.
Wow.
Especially not for me to me. So we're all kind of walking around with this ongoing inner dialogue of self-judgment. And that's the hardest pill to swallow for people. That the first remedy is, I call it the sacred pause. Like, stop. Put your hand on your heart. think of the person you love the most. That's super easy for you to love. Like, I have a nephew I'm obsessed with. I can love him very easily. I think of him and how easy it is for the channel of my heart to his easy love. Now, could I give that same love easily to me in the moments where I feel the most unlovable and the most scared? That's the hardest thing for people to do. Not run a marathon or change their diet or, it's actually receiving love, me to me, or you could say God to me.
Wow, that was such a profound, deep answer. My God, I never expected that. But wow, it's like a wake-up call. Wow, this is so true. And then suddenly I'm thinking, am I giving myself enough love that I'm supposed to, not just supposed to, but, because I also have a nephew that I'm madly in love with. And he poops, he cries, he screams, and he comes and draws over all the stuff. My home is like a graffiti wall that he has done. But then we just love it, but something goes wrong. We have so much of rules, terms and conditions apply, and it's like a mafia coming and enforcing no, this is not for you.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you're a doctor. I don't know you, but I can imagine as a doctor, you've done a lot of things to achieve that, as have I, there's a particular flavor amongst those of us who are achievers. I call it the masculine in all of us, right? Where it's like, do. And this morning I was looking at doing my to-do list and I just stopped and I was like, this is never ending. One of my teachers is Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, you have the right to just be. Like, that's your birthright. And I think I get very caught in the doing because there's this unconscious often, by the way, that's another conversation we could have because the unconscious is directing so much of this. There's this unconscious belief that like, if I just, I'm getting my PhD in Hinduism now. It's like, if I get one more doctorate degree, then I'll be lovable. Then I'll be okay. It's like, when does it ever end? And I don't think this is a feature of American society. I see this with so many, especially of my Southeast Asian friends, where, your parents expect you to become a doctor or something, computer scientist. And so it's never.
So relate to that. In fact, we were talking a few minutes ago about the concept of happiness. In fact, here, the word for happiness in Sanskrit is, I love the etymology of some of the Sanskrit words. It's just beyond. And the word for happiness in Sanskrit is santosha. And if you break that word, santosha, san means complete and tosha means acceptance. So which means when you say you have the right to just be, and just be means what? You're accepting the current moment, present moment without any resistance. So happiness is all about how much aligned are you in this moment without any resistance. The more resistance you have, it goes to the other side, which is disease or no ease. And complete acceptance, complete alignment. And that is what is happiness.
Yeah.
In fact,
and not wait for perfect conditions.
Exactly.
Like, what if there was an, ojas, this concept of our psychophysiological immunity? It's so much bigger than just physical immunity. It's like this whole realm. What if this, I think of it as an auric, soft, sort of gelatinous, honey-like orb around my body. What if this container of my loving presence were able to hold disease? And still, I'm identified with that ojas. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely, yes.
Like when I get this body weight, when I look like this, when I get this PhD, when I rid myself of this disease or that, then I'll be happy. No, it's like that's never going to happen. There's always, one of the principles of Ayurveda is A, Mother Nature is the great regulator, but B, Mother Nature, I say in my book, with all due respect, Mother Nature can be like a wily minx. She's always chaotic and changing. Yes, she has predictable seasons and rhythms, but Mother Nature, I mean, I think we have this idealistic vision of Mother Nature as this sort of wonderful panacea. I did a wilderness survival course, Vignesh, for 9 months. Wow. Mother Nature will eat you alive if you don't know how to care for yourself. And so there's always going to be struggle and imbalance, always. And can we find something else that's bigger than that? And that's the spiritual part of Ayurveda.
Wow. Again, when you said the Mother Nature, I want to talk about the Sanskrit word for Mother Nature. It's Prakriti.
Please, I love all the Sanskrit. Shower me in Sanskrit.
The word for nature is Prakriti. Okay, we also talk about constitution, but the word Prakriti has two sounds, the pra and kriti. Pra means evolve, progress, and kriti means never-ending ritual. So,
wow.
It means it's like a never-ending evolution. That's what nature is all about, and that's the word that is associated to that.
I've never heard that translation. So you translated pra as ongoing, and
see, in English you have the word like progress. Pro has its origin from the Sanskrit word pra. Pra, and kriti is like a never-ending ritual.
I've heard the translation pra. I mean, I know Sanskrit can have many, many meanings, but to be joined to, and kriti is described as nature. And so prakriti is the way in which you're formed as nature, which I love that as well.
Yes, that's the meaning. What I'm talking about is nirukti. Nirukti, yes. Etymology, where you break down it's like Sanskrit is like a language of Legos. You have lots of things, and you can form a new word with everything. So when you dissect it, this is how it sounds.
So it's an ongoing evolutionary ritual.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I'm going to totally use that and credit it. We need to bring you into Shakti school. I would love to have you as a guest. Our women would love you.
By the way, after I started my Ayurveda retreat, when I see that 60 to 70% of the patients who come here are women. And then I also make a joke. And if men come here, it's because their woman asked them to come.
Totally. In the United States, I just got back from an Ayurveda. I did a 2-week Panchakarma in California. And I was 2 weeks. I'm with the practitioners every day. And one of them was like, oh, we only get women. The men only come, they're coerced by their wives or girlfriends. And then they're like, wow, this is amazing. But they never would do it on their own. I think
but now
I wonder what that speaks to. I wonder what that speaks to.
I think it's about, we men are brought up in such a way that you are sick only if you're bedridden, That's that.
Men.
Yeah, men. We are okay. Once I tell you one example. I had a couple who came for a consultation, and the first woman came, and then she was going through menopause, hot flashes, heat waves, hormonal imbalances, and sometimes anxiety and sleep is disturbed. And we sat for like half an hour to take the whole consultation, and then so now it's time for men, and then she was because they both were sitting together. And then I was asking the gentleman, sir, so what are your expectations for the treatment? Is there something that you want to improve? And he said, no, I just want a good Ayurvedic massage. So don't you have any other health improvement needs? No, I'm fine. Within 2 minutes, you should see the anger boiling in his wife, because how can you tell this lie in this midday sun? And then, doctor, he's lying. He snores. He's having high blood pressure. He's stressed out, and and he's tired most of the time, and he's always spaced out. I mean, and then suddenly, you have to send the wife out and then have a common talk with him. So it's like men are taught you have a big problem with your health only if you're bedridden. The need taking care is not so much connected, but today men are coming up, that there is a slow shift also happening on the one hand, but it's not like how it is with when it comes to the woman in general.
I think there's a really dangerous narrative in our culture that men, and in my culture, white men are the demons right now, but men in general aren't getting a lot of good love right now. And maybe for good reason. Okay. I don't mean to say there isn't a good reason, but when I work with men, first of all, there are so many amazing good men on the planet. And we forget the context in which you guys have grown up, whether it's India, because I've lived there and there's machismo all over the world. Men are taught the only emotion that's appropriate is anger and toughness. And from Ayurveda, we understand if you repress all of these other emotions, it's going to build up in the body. And I really feel like women, obviously, I could speak so long about women and children are more susceptible to many of the chemical overdrives on our planet right now. But at least it's okay for many women to experience their a little bit more of the fullness of who we are. And so I think the great revolution of Siva Shakti is happening on the planet, where women are being able to step into their more, their boundaries and their sense of agency, and even, yes, their anger and righteous anger, and men are being given this opportunity to soften into the fact that they are actually sensitive creatures.
That's so true. I think so spot on. And I think when you're saying that men also need some love, maybe, the world is only a reflection of how you treat yourself, in the end.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's not a very popular idea right now, my friend. Not everyone has studied the Sanatana Dharma.
Exactly.
I'm like, don't you guys know that the inner cosmology is a reflection of the outer cosmology? It's like, no, please don't say that. I think, I'm a huge activist. We do lots of good work, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but external seva is important. Activism is vital. It's like active love, right? Love without action is dead. But if we forget that internal spiritual journey of, for me, my question now is, where am I at war inside of myself? Rather than taking that out onto Instagram or social media, because our country is really crazy right now. I don't know if you're aware. Like we're almost in a psychological civil war. We are. To expect that we're going to be able to heal that internal psychological warfare without first doing our own practices of healing, it will never happen, no matter how much outer rituals or outer activism we do. Your great lineage taught us that. Gandhi, who taught Martin Luther King, and so I'm a big fan of both. We need both. And I think that really is the Ayurvedic way. In Ayurveda, you do all the remedies. Ayurveda is very active. And at the same time, good Ayurveda also asks us to look at the subtle spiritual, psychological, emotional roots of where those imbalances begin. Otherwise, you can do 2 weeks of panchakarma every single year till you die. But if you don't stop eating sugar every night because you're lonely and asking why, what is this spiritual poverty? I mean, I could talk for hours about this stuff, Vignesh, but I just feel really grateful to be here with you and to be able to tap into the spirit of Kerala through the wood on the walls behind you, and to feel the brotherhood and sisterhood between the two of us. You're a complete stranger to me, and yet our hearts are connected through this lineage of Ayurveda, despite the fact that I'm a white girl from the American South that grew up a Southern Baptist. I mean, this is a magical world.
Exactly.
That you and I are together right now.
Exactly. And that's also the beauty of the current time, even though there's a lot of chaos happening outside. But imagine we are able to talk about this holistic healing. At one point of time, if you talk about it, you'd be stoned to death.
And in my culture, my friend, I'm from the witches. We were killed.
We burnt alive.
Why do you think I'm studying Ayurveda? They burned my books. So I'm just thank you, Ayurveda. It's kept alive. But this is something maybe to end on. Ayurveda at the end of the day is Mother Nature wisdom. It doesn't matter. I mean, I want to call it Ayurveda to respect you and your tradition, but true Ayurveda shows up everywhere because it is the Sanatana Dharma, the ongoing awareness of the pattern of life that belongs to really nobody, and yet everyone.
That's so profound how you put it. And I think we should really, on one hand, we have to be grateful for the current evolution that is going on one hand. See, all the great changes happened after a lot of conflicts and revolutions. So even, one of my spiritual teachers, Swami Chinmayananda, he used to always say that when a baby is born, there is a lot of blood. There is a lot of pain in the mother.
And drama.
So, yes, exactly. That pain and blood is giving way to something new. So we have to embrace it and not resist it. And as you said, this concept of being aware and mindful in this chaos, that's going to be one of the greatest gifts that we can embrace today.
I believe it. If my goal is to try to remain, you bring tears to my eyes, but to try to remain, one of my favorite definitions of the word yogini or yogi is she who is a refuge for all, and who takes refuge in no one but herself, higher self. If I can remain steady and calm for myself and my students and my family and my community, and some days I'm not, but if I can do that throughout 2020 and beyond, I think that's the best way that I can serve my community, is to just try to remain human, loving, capaciously loving in a world where that's ever more challenging.
And that's why we have these T-shirts of human being in a different sequence, being human. So we all need to relearn what it means to be being human. And it's also, again, you said, tiknata and be. It's like it's a being, you are a continuous tense of be.
Yeah.
And I love this quote. I think it was by Osho. He said that just be, don't become. Don't try to be something, just be yourself. And in that ironically, Osho, who is claimed to be very tantric, in one of my favorite definitions of Shakti is she who is always becoming, and Shiva, of course, he who is always pure being. And so to be able to always remain steeped in that part of you that's unchanging, and yet embrace that we are Prakriti, right? This ritual of evolution. It's very paradoxical. I feel that the universe has a very good sense of humor. Oh, for sure, yes. It's just that we need to be more open to it, not so having a tunnel blinded vision.
Right.
Wow, Katie, that was such a phenomenal conversation. I could feel how passionate you are with what you do. And thank God we have people like you, and we are able to connect and build this community and this tribe of the whole aspect of holistic healing. And, the word for health in Ayurveda is swastha. And swa means, my purest self, and sta means to be connected. So I think all the work we are doing is helping people. And also, when we're also helping people, we are also helping ourselves to connect into our deeper self. And that's what the concept of healing is all about.
Well, I've just had a surprise with you. You invited me. I had no idea what this was. And this was such a fun experience to be with you and to hear all of your definitions in Sanskrit etymology. I would love to be, now we are connected, and to connect our communities and our hearts and our countries. It feels like, I hope, the beginning of an ongoing conversation between the two of us. I would love to have you on my podcast now, and we can talk about other things.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'll just definitely put your all the details that you do in the show notes, and also I see that you do a lot of teaching and helping people learn about Ayurveda. So I'll also put the details about the Shakti School and also the link for your book. So thank you so much. It was really, really an honor for me to have you in the podcast.
Likewise. Thank you.
फूटे फूल पूर्ण सुखे फूटे फूल